Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. As soon as she finishes the code, we'll let her go quietly. She doesn't suspect a thing. Mason will take her job. She's just an old engineer stuck in the past. Margaret Delaney froze outside the second-floor conference room of Palomar Systems in Denver. She had only returned for her glasses. It was past 8 p.m., and the office was almost dark. Lights were dimmed to save energy. Voices echoed through the glass wall. Kyle Benton, newly promoted tech lead and son of the CEO's college roommate, was speaking. She's building the platform we'll run for years. Once it's done, Mason slides in. HR won't object? Another voice asked. She won't fight. She doesn't have it in her. Kyle chuckled. They were talking about her. Margaret. She stood frozen, heart pounding. When she finally turned away, glasses forgotten, she didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just walked out into the brisk Colorado night, her mind racing. At 57, Margaret had been with Palomar for 22 years. She'd seen 3 CEOs, 4 buyouts, and more reorganizations than she could count. The code base still running their logistics platform was hers. Elegant, modular, and laced with hidden safeguards. Kyle's arrival had seemed harmless at first. Young, polished, curious. But his questions weren't about features. They were about structure, access, dependencies. He was studying her, preparing to replace and erase her. That night, she made backups. Every script, every note. She encrypted them, documented everything, and stored it off-site, not to sabotage, to prepare. They thought she was outdated. They forgot Margaret was the foundation holding their future together. She encrypted the backups and stored them in places only she could find. She printed notes, diagrams, drafts. Years of thought mapped out and secured. Margaret didn't know her next move, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going down quietly. If Kyle thought she was outdated or docile, he had made a costly mistake. Margaret Delaney was not just a systems engineer. She was a woman who had spent her life being underestimated and always stayed 10 steps ahead. The next morning, she arrived early to the Denver office. At her desk, she opened a fresh notebook, a habit she hadn't needed in years. On the first page, she simply wrote the date. No titles, no slogans, just facts. She would document everything, from code changes to hallway conversations. Looking back, the signs had been there. Subtle shifts. Kyle, freshly promoted under the new CEO, had taken an unusual interest in her architecture. His questions weren't idle curiosity. He was studying, replicating. He always asked politely, but Margaret had started obfuscating her logic, adding unique encryption patterns and layered functions, just in case. Now she knew why. They didn't want her as a consultant. They didn't even want her around. They wanted her system. Without her, the loyalty she had shown meant nothing. The praise they gave was hollow. Margaret didn't build systems like others. Her design was layered, adaptive, and nearly impossible to replicate without deep knowledge. It had evolved from a side project to the backbone of Palomar's internal logistics infrastructure. And now Kyle had taken her early restructuring model and rebranded it. New name, bold timeline, glossy presentation. He'd pitched it as his vision. But he forgot one thing. He only had the surface. Margaret still held the foundation. Kyle's biggest mistake wasn't trying to take credit for my work. It was assuming I didn't notice. In the weeks that followed, I acted like nothing had changed. I joined meetings, smiled when addressed, gave polished updates, and even welcomed internal audits with open hands. If you believe quiet strength can outlast corporate chaos, and you're ready for the next chapter in stories like mine, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss what comes next. But behind the curtain, I worked differently, deliberately. Every module I completed, I mirrored, encrypted, and backed up to personal cloud storage under anonymized credentials. I adjusted timestamps, embedded alert triggers, not to cause chaos, just to track unauthorized tampering. I also started watching Kyle, who he met with, what he printed, how long he was away from his desk. Then came Mason, the supposed new hire. His resume read more marketing than engineering. His presence made sense only if someone wanted a puppet, not a programmer. Quietly, I started talking. A casual lunch with Celia from compliance, a hallway chat with Greg from IT security. I didn't make accusations. I asked questions that planted seeds. Then, one morning, I spotted it. An access log showing one of my legacy test scripts executed on the company's sandbox server. But the user ID wasn't mine. It was Kyle's. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the snow-glazed courtyard. They weren't planning to let me go. They were already stealing my work. Later that week, I overheard Mason boasting in the break room. "I've seen her architecture. It's bloated. I could streamline it in a week." He laughed like I was some relic. Kyle nodded, feet on the table, too confident. They thought they were replacing old code, but what they were really doing was rewriting history, with me conveniently erased. I'd seen this before. I just never expected to be the target. This time, they picked the wrong person. That day, I stopped preserving what I had and started rebuilding. I didn't storm into Kyle's office. I didn't yell. I just rewrote everything. Not out of anger, but with surgical precision. I redesigned core functions using nested conditionals and lookup chains buried in redundancy. To the naked eye, nothing had changed. The interface, the output, the reports. But beneath it all, I rewired the structure. Without my understanding, it was unusable. Each night, I stayed late, saying I was finalizing deployment. In truth, I was archiving everything. Server logs, internal memos, access trails. I scanned notebooks, tagged email threads, and compiled early drafts. Every line of data told the same story. I built the system. Alone. I made 3 physical copies and 6 digital backups. 1 I stored in a locked safety deposit box. 2 more I sent, encrypted, to an old friend in federal procurement. Just in case, I typed in the subject line. No further explanation. During the day, I kept the act alive, smiling politely at Kyle, updating Mason, who still sat beside me like a child with a coloring book pretending to understand code. It was draining, but I endured. Then came Friday. A pale blue envelope sat centered on my keyboard, my name in stiff black ink. Inside, a single paragraph. Effective immediately, your role has been made redundant. Your departure will follow standard policy. No signature. Just Claire Rogers, Director of People. No meeting, no escort, just silence. At noon, Kyle stopped by my desk. "Rough morning," he said, faking concern. "Let me know if you need help packing." I smiled. Small, cold, deliberate. "I already have everything I need." He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't want to know. By 12:15, my desk was empty. But my presence? Still everywhere. No farewell, no speech. No one from HR escorted me out. I took my time, folded my cardigan, unplugged my charger, slid a photo of my niece into my tote. My computer was still on when I walked away. No one asked for my password. No one thought they'd need it. By 1 p.m., Mason was sitting at my desk. New blazer, new haircut, and a smile far too confident for someone who'd never written a deployable script in his life. Within an hour, he emailed the entire department. Excited to lead this next phase of Atlas Core. Looking forward to building on Margaret's foundation and introducing new efficiencies. First client presentation next week. Let's build something bold. I read it from home, tea in hand. Bold, I repeated with a quiet laugh. I hadn't sabotaged a thing. That's not my style. The platform worked. It had passed every internal test and had been running silently on a backup environment for 2 weeks before I left. But it was complex, deeply layered. Self-referencing logic modules, adaptive triggers. Even a skilled developer would need weeks to decode it. Mason? No chance. By Tuesday, the crack showed. At 8:14 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. At 8:31, an email from Kyle. Subject: quick question. Hi, Margaret. Hope you're well. Could you clarify a couple minor points about the harmonization layer? A quick chat would help us a lot. I didn't reply. By 10 a.m., Palomar hosted a demo with a major logistics client, one that depended on the new platform. It was supposed to be a showpiece, a game changer, real-time coordination, unified architecture, predictive analytics, everything built on what I'd finished days before. Kyle had pitched it like it was theirs. Now, they were about to find out just how much they didn't understand. Mason spoke like he was giving a TED Talk. Our new platform will reduce operational drag by at least 17% based on our projections, he said, voice full of confidence. He shared his screen, clicked into the dashboard, and silence. The graphs didn't load. The page flickered. The system stalled during initialization. His cursor hovered, then wandered, opening diagnostics he clearly didn't understand. Are we still connected? Asked one of the external reps. Yes, just a moment, Mason replied. Might be some local caching. In truth, the platform had failed to execute the pre-processing layer. The harmonization sequence hadn't loaded. Why? Because it relied on a silent validation key I had rotated and secured before I left. Not broken, just inaccessible, unless you knew the key. At 10:22, my phone rang again. Same unknown number. This time I picked up and set it down on speaker. We just need her help for an hour, Kyle's voice whispered. We can offer a consulting fee, whatever she wants. She doesn't even have to come in. A pause. Then Mason. She did this. I know she did. It worked last week. I hung up. At 11:40, I got a text from Celia in accounting. Heard about the demo. Total disaster. Mason looked like he'd seen a ghost. Are you okay? Miss you here? I didn't answer right away. I stepped onto my balcony, wrapped my cardigan tighter against the breeze, and looked out across Denver. Palomar had made its move. Now it was my turn. That afternoon, I got an email from a firm called Grayson and Hartwell Systems, a mid-size consultancy known for rescuing failed tech rollouts. A former colleague had tipped them off. Would I consider a conversation? No pressure, no politics. I replied instantly. I walked into the interview calm, prepared, and unshaken. 2 hours later, they weren't asking for a resume. They were asking when I could start. You wrote this? Asked the lead architect, a gray-haired man named Everett, with 25 years in enterprise systems. Every line, I replied. He turned the documentation over like it was something priceless. I've only seen logic like this once before, and that guy's been retired a decade. By week's end, they made me an offer. Full autonomy over system design, no management duties unless I asked, and a salary higher than I ever earned at Palomar. I accepted with the calm certainty of someone who'd already walked through fire. Across town, things were unraveling fast. During an investor prep call, Kyle received a notice from Internal Systems Compliance. One of their mirrored test environments had crashed. Mason had tried to run a full overwrite, without authorization. At first, Kyle thought it was a minor glitch. Then came the call from infrastructure. Mason deleted the archive, the engineer said bluntly. Thought it was just cache. He wiped the dependency chains. Kyle's throat tightened. You mean he deleted her sandbox? It's gone, the engineer confirmed. And it was tied to the deployment core. The restore point is corrupted. Signatures are unrecoverable. Backups? Silence. That was the backup. By late afternoon, a new number landed on Kyle's desk. $13.2 million. Development loss, testing hours, and irreplaceable architecture. Gone. He slammed a door so hard the frame cracked, then called Mason into his office. "You said you understood it." "I did," Mason stammered. "But her code had all these buried modules. I thought they were deprecated." "You deleted the core," Kyle snapped. "I thought it was junk." "No," Kyle muttered, pacing. "It was everything. And now it's gone." Meanwhile, I sat with my new team at Grayson and Hartwell, reviewing the first prototype of a real-time analytics dashboard. They listened, took notes, respected the architecture, and most importantly, understood who built it. I handed out the printouts, each one stamped with my name, creation date, and personal copyright. Everett, seated across the table, gave a quiet smile. Palomar had no idea what they lost. I took a sip of my coffee. "They didn't," I said, "but they will." The first to leave Palomar wasn't loud or high profile. It was Elena from Infrastructure, a steady hand who kept the network humming for 5 years. She sent her resignation by email, skipped the farewell cake, and left without a word. A week later, 2 senior engineers in cybersecurity followed. Their exit interviews cited strategic misalignment. But the truth? They were done. Done watching good code rot under bad leadership. Then the rumors began. Margaret's at Grayson and Hartwell now. She's leading a new platform. It's built on the architecture Palomar threw away. In tech, whispers move fast. And everyone remembered the demo disaster. Everyone saw Kyle's stiff smile as he tried to explain technical delays. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. I built the system. Mason broke it. Kyle let it happen. At Grayson and Hartwell, I didn't trash Palomar, not even when asked directly. My silence earned more respect than any criticism could. Instead, I let the results speak. My new platform, an adaptive logistics core, outperformed projections by 20% in its first rollout. Internally, the engineers nicknamed it M-Line. The CEO joked about watermarking my name into the code. Meanwhile, at Palomar, Kyle sat through another resignation. This time Brandon, from product. He'd been one of Kyle's last defenders. "This place is bleeding talent," Brandon said flatly. "And you still think Mason can fix it?" Kyle rubbed his forehead. "We've made some missteps." "It's not missteps," Brandon replied. "It's ego." Then he walked out, Grayson and Hartwell tote bag in hand. By the end of the month, 8 more people had resigned from Palomar. 4 were already working at Grayson and Hartwell. One of them, new to the onboarding session, looked at me and asked, "Did you plan all this?" I gave a faint smile. Number. But I'm not surprised. Kyle, meanwhile, was unraveling. The board had started pressing harder. Why was talent walking out the door? Why had the Atlas Core project suddenly been marked inactive in last quarter's report? And why was there no documentation to justify the firing of its lead architect? Kyle tried to shift the blame. Team inefficiencies, outdated systems, lack of cross-training. But none of it held. Not anymore. Worse, whispers of legal exposure were creeping in. Not from me, but from a major logistics partner who claimed the failed deployment cost them real revenue. Due diligence began showing up in internal memos. Auditors had been requested quietly, and all the while, I kept building. At Grayson and Hartwell, I reviewed code with interns, led architecture sessions, and stayed focused. My record didn't need defending. It spoke for itself. CEO David Lennox wasn't a man who raised his voice. He didn't need to. One look could silence a room. That Monday, he entered the executive boardroom like a storm cloud. He dropped a folder onto the table with a dull thud. "Can someone explain," he said calmly. How we lost a $13 million code base and half of mid-level engineering in under 2 quarters? Silence. Kyle sat stiffly, hands folded, sweat just beginning to gather at his brow. He opened his mouth to answer, but David waved him off. Let's go through it together, he continued. The system we branded Atlas Core, the one we presented to clients and featured in earnings calls, is now inoperable. Yes? A few nods. The engineer behind it was Margaret Delaney, correct? Kyle swallowed hard. Yes, but... David raised his hand again. She was fired with no review, no performance record, no HR file. He leaned in. Just a vague restructuring note. That's it? So, again, David said, voice low but firm, how does someone like her get replaced by someone like Mason, who, according to this internal audit, deleted our only working environment by running a purge script on what he thought was junk code? A cough echoed at the end of the table. Kyle's face turned red. I made a judgment call, he said, voice trembling. Margaret was resistant to modernization. She wouldn't document her work. We needed someone more adaptable. Adaptable? David raised an eyebrow. Your choice destroyed years of development. Now Grayson and Hartwell is winning contracts we were bidding for, using her architecture. She took the system, Kyle mumbled. No, David snapped. She wrote the system. She documented it, under her name, and you failed to protect it as company IP before firing her. Kyle leaned back, stunned. He hadn't realized how much David knew. Here's what I think, David continued. You underestimated her. You thought she was outdated, quiet, easy to replace, but she was the only one holding your department together. He stood, adjusted his blazer. And you fired her to give your friend a job. The words sat heavy in the room. I want a full investigation. Every sign-off, every calendar invite, every security log. I want to know who knew what and when. He turned toward legal. Give me options. Legal, operational, reputational. We are not going to let this bury us. Kyle sank in his chair. For the first time, he looked small. Meanwhile, at Grayson and Hartwell, I was wrapping up a strategy session. We'd just secured a new client. Ironically, one Palomar lost after the Atlas Core meltdown. After the call, Everett leaned over. Heard Kyle's digging through the rubble. I didn't flinch. He'll find what he built. You gonna make it public? No, I said, calm. I'm not chasing revenge. Everett smiled. You've made your point. Just a quiet reckoning. The slow collapse of Palomar began quietly. Kyle showed up at Grayson and Hartwell's front desk without an appointment. The receptionist blinked. Do you have a meeting scheduled? He glanced at his phone. Could you just tell Margaret Delaney that Kyle Brennan is here? She typed something in. I'm sorry. Ms. Delaney is in a closed planning session. It's urgent, he whispered. She'll want to hear this. I didn't come down. I was in the second-floor conference room with my team, discussing rollout schedules. When someone mentioned Kyle was in the lobby, I didn't even look up. Ignore it. He returned the next day, and the day after. By his fourth visit, security alerted leadership. Everett, our CTO, met him himself. You're causing a disruption, he said. I just need 5 minutes. Why? Everett asked. Kyle swallowed hard. Because I made a mistake. That afternoon, my assistant forwarded a meeting request. I said, book it. 10 minutes. On site. I want it visible. At 3:59 p.m. that Friday, Kyle walked into the room. His blazer was wrinkled, his eyes tired. I was already reviewing system audit notes. Thank you for seeing me, he said. I didn't look up. 10 minutes. He shifted nervously. We've lost 2 more clients. Mason's out. Legal's launched an inquiry. I made the wrong call. You were the one holding it together. I looked at him for the first time. "You're the only one who can fix this," he said. "We'll support you however you want. Name the role, the salary. I'll resign if you ask. Just help us." He looked desperate, but I wasn't angry. I was done needing their approval, and 10 minutes was all I'd promised. "Please," Kyle said, voice shaking. "I'm not asking as a manager or the one who wronged you, but as someone who truly regrets what I did. Come back. You can name the role, the salary. I'll step down if you want. I'll tell my father. Just help us." Then, to the quiet shock of a passing staffer outside the glass, Kyle dropped to his knees. "I'm begging you." I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke. "I wrote that system to support an entire company. You tried to hand it to someone who couldn't tell a logic gate from a dead end." Kyle nodded, eyes low. "You thought you were replacing a function," I said calmly. "But I wasn't a function. I was the foundation." He looked away, ashamed. "You didn't just fire me," I continued. "You fired your future." I stood, slid my audit notes into a folder. "I have a team now. People who listen, who value experience. I'm building something real, something Palomar doesn't deserve to touch." Kyle raised his eyes. "Please, just think about it." "I have," I said, walking to the door. "Your 10 minutes are up." The letter arrived by courier 2 days later. I opened it carefully. The sender, Reed and Barrett, legal counsel for Palomar Systems. The message was sharp and familiar. "You are hereby requested to cease and desist all use of the proprietary system architecture developed during your time at Palomar." They were accusing me of theft. I folded the letter and placed it beside my keyboard. Later, I called a meeting with Everett and our in-house legal advisor. "They're suing," I said simply. Everett glanced up. "You knew this might happen." "I did," I replied. "That's why I documented everything." I opened a hard shell case, pulled out a thick folder, and laid it on the table. Timestamps, metadata, version histories, every line. My defense, ready. Printed and digital copies of my code were stored on encrypted drives, archived long before I left Palomar. My handwritten notes, years of engineering journals, and binders of version histories were all sealed in evidence-grade order. Our legal advisor flipped through them slowly, visibly impressed. "You were ready," he said. "I had to be," I replied. "I saw them coming before they ever saw me leave." What Palomar hadn't realized was that I'd filed a formal intellectual property declaration a year earlier. It covered the adaptive logic framework I created on my own time, off contract. At the time, they ignored it. They didn't understand what it was worth. Now, after losing millions and their credibility, they wanted it back. A week later, they filed suit. The tech world noticed. Blogs, LinkedIn threads, headlines, "Palomar sues former lead engineer over abandoned architecture." But the backlash hit fast. The comments turned sharp. "She built it. You fired her, then begged her to return. And now this?" Meanwhile, our legal team countered precisely. My documentation was solid. The timeline was airtight. And the code I deployed at Grayson and Hartwell had never once touched Palomar's servers. Our case hinged on one phrase: independent authorship. A hearing was set. It would take time. But inside Palomar, their new interim legal counsel already warned the board, this won't end well. Still, they pushed forward, not to win, but to intimidate, to slow me down, to save face. But I didn't flinch. While they spent resources in court, I focused on the work. I published a white paper on system elasticity in decentralized frameworks, built on the same code Palomar tried to bury. It was cited in 3 academic journals and adopted in a Department of Energy initiative. Even junior developers at Palomar, those who once called me outdated, were sharing my work in Slack channels. And on a cloudy Tuesday morning in a quiet conference room, I sipped my tea as the summary ruling came in. Case dismissed. There was no theft, no breach, no misconduct. In fact, the court found that Palomar had acted with negligence and unprofessional conduct in my dismissal, and worse, had attempted to suppress my authorship after the fact. I sat quietly for a moment, then nodded once. Good, I said softly. Within a week, the story was everywhere. Business journals, tech newsletters, even a headline on LinkedIn. Engineer vindicated in landmark IP case, how a quiet woman in her 50s held her ground against a corporate giant. Why competence still matters. 2 universities reached out to ask if I'd consider guest lecturing. I declined. Maybe later. For now, I wanted to keep building. At Grayson and Hartwell, my team surprised me after the ruling. No big party, just a small cake with my name on it, a handwritten card signed by everyone, and a framed printout of my original architecture diagram with a gold caption beneath it. Everett raised a toast. To the one who proved integrity beats noise. I smiled. Not because I needed the praise, but because it reminded me that quiet excellence still had a place in this world. Over the next few months, our new system, built on the platform I developed after Palomar, launched in 3 mid-sized logistics firms. Performance exceeded expectations. Investors took notice. They offered me a seat at the strategic leadership table. I accepted, not for the title, but for the platform it gave me to ensure people like me would never be overlooked again. As for Palomar, the case loss accelerated their downfall. Kyle resigned quietly. The board removed their CEO 6 weeks later. Their stock plunged. Eventually, a larger firm absorbed them. No one celebrated. Months later, a letter arrived at my office. No return address. Inside, just a few handwritten lines. You were right. I was wrong. I ruined everything. I hope one day you can forgive me. Kyle. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer. I didn't need revenge or apologies. I had my future, and that was enough. The truth had stood, quietly and unshakably, on its own. I never set out to become a symbol. I just wanted to do my job, build clean systems, and be respected for the years I gave to the work. But life has a way of revealing people's true colors when everything's on the line. If you've ever been overlooked, replaced, or underestimated because of your age, your quiet nature, or your refusal to play politics, you're not alone. I was called outdated, disposable, but I wasn't either. I was the foundation. And when they took me for granted, I left with my dignity intact, and the receipts to prove every bit of my value. If my story resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Share your story. Tell me how you stood your ground or how you wish you had. Let's create a space where experience is honored and quiet strength is seen for what it truly is: powerful. To anyone out there still working in a place that doesn't respect your voice, document everything. Trust your instincts. And never confuse silence with weakness. Some of us don't raise our voices because we're too busy building things that last. If you believe that integrity matters more than noise, and that wisdom earned through years of steady work deserves to be valued, I hope you'll subscribe. There are more stories like mine, more people like us, waiting to be heard. And maybe the next one we tell will be yours. Let's remind the world that calm, measured, brilliant work still speaks volumes, whether anyone's clapping for it or not.